Now,
Hello, RavensCast. We are back at it again with the second episode. I would like you to introduce you to our second guest, Doug Plumb. Hey, Doug, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit?
Sure, man. Well, obviously, my name is Doug Plumb. I'm not a Ravens alumni. I'm actually a Pitt Meadows alumni, but I've been involved with the Terry Fox program quite a bit. Somebody who is very near and dear to me. His name is Eric Bucher. Eric actually helped at Terry Fox for a while. I don't even know if you guys know who Eric is. He was an assistant there for a while, and Eric passed 7 years ago. But once Eric got involved with Terry Fox and I left Pitt Meadows, I kind of became closer to the program. And then obviously you guys know Coach Brett McDonald, Terry Fox alumni. Me and Brett are really good friends. Brett's one of my best friends. So I came in and started working with some kids in the morning and stuff just to kind of give back. Probably about 5 years ago. And that was with Coach, I think Steve was still there. Anyways, Coach Steve Hansen and a bunch of those guys, Colin McDonald, who used to be there, and obviously Brett and Cam Slaymaker and stuff, and Brad Peterson and the whole crew there. So yeah, been involved from a little bit of a distance, but this will be fun.
all right, and so our second, sort of part of the question is, do you want to go over your life a bit? Where you started, how it was growing up, how you fell in love with basketball, if you did fall in love with basketball, how you started playing, what that was like high school.
Yeah, so I grew up in Pitt Meadows. I started playing soccer when I was young. My dad was actually played professionally a little bit. And so that was kind of like my first love when I was young. And funny enough, when I was a kid, if I couldn't be the best at something, I didn't want to play it. So there was a kid, his name was Jeff Payne. And Jeff Payne was just better than me at soccer. There's nothing I could do about it. So my dad, you guys have both met my dad, right, Norm? Yeah. So Normie, he has Parkinson's now, right? So his physical ability is much different than it used to be, but he was a killer. So this guy used to have me in the field doing diving headers at 5, 6 years old in the rain on a gravel field. And anyways, that was my first love. And then I came across this guy, Jeff Payne. There's nothing, no matter what I did, I was not going to be better than Jeff. And my parents actually went through a divorce, and then I wanted to play hockey, but my mom was a shift worker and my dad was living out of town or working out of town a little bit. And I couldn't get to hockey practices, and it was just so expensive that there was a coach named Rich Goulet. I didn't know who Rich Goulet was, and he had a program called Little Dribblers. So kind of to keep me busy, my mom put me in this program called Little Dribblers. And for the first 3 weeks, I hated basketball. It was awful because all I wanted to do is play hockey. So I would sulk when I'd have to go to basketball practice. And I remember, well, I don't remember, but my mom tells me, so I remember that. She goes, Rich Goulet. I would walk up to her and goes, "Your boy's got talent." And that was it. And then from there, it just kind of took off, and I realized I was pretty good at a young age, and that kind of started the whole thing. And went to Pitt Meadows High School until the 9th grade. And at the time, I'm 33 years old, so at the time it was hard to get a scholarship out of Western Canada, and I decided to move to Minnesota, to a suburb of Minneapolis, and I went to Hastings High School down there. So I was 3 years down there and ended up having a pretty good high school career, and then went on to go play university and whatnot. So that's kind of a roundabout story of where it started. But for where it really started was in the gym in Pitt Meadows with Coach Rich Goulet, who recently passed away. But he was a special dude, similar to what you guys have at Terry Fox and what Van Oss and Chambers have created there. Goulet created something very similar at Pitt Meadows.
Yeah. What university did you first go to for basketball?
Out of high school, I went to Minnesota State.
Oh, yeah.
And then from there, I transferred home and I finished up at UBC. So I was at UBC for 3 years.
Awesome. And let's moving on to the next topic. So when did you after, because I know it was after your playing career, did you ever first of all, did you ever consider playing pro? Did you ever play professional?
Yeah, I did play pro. So I went to UBC, and then after I played at UBC, I went and took a professional contract in Hungary, and was there for a year. Then I played in Romania, and then I signed in France, and I actually took a job instead of taking the contract. I was working for a marketing agency at the time and working with Nike, and I took the job because I just thought, it's cool. I really enjoy basketball. Obviously, it's my passion, but it was such a good job offer that I ended up taking it. I did that for about 5 years, and then from there got back into coaching because I miss basketball.
Did you
But yeah,
how would you
go ahead.
what's the difference between like what you noticed at the high school level and then D1 at Minnesota State? Minnesota State's D1, right?
D2. We were the number one D2 in the country.
So
So essentially, yeah, the level is kind of comparable.
so D1 and then the bigger jump to college. Like what's the biggest thing you noticed? Like intake sense.
Well, people are a whole heck of a lot better every time you click up. So when I was coming up in Pitt Meadows, basketball was really good. I mean, in BC, we had a lot of talent in the province, but just the bodies, like the athleticism, the size, obviously the attention that gets paid to the sport. So I went from playing grade 9 in BC to the next year playing varsity at a 4A school and starting as a sophomore. And that was probably the biggest jump that I made because I was pretty skilled at a young age. I'd put a lot of time in. I mean, you guys have been in the gym with me. You see like the way that we train. That's the way that I train. And I train like that religiously, obsessively for years upon years. So from a skill standpoint, I was close to those guys, if not probably even better. Because ultimately it doesn't really matter who you're playing against. It's, how much time you put in your game to kind of sharpen your axe, so to speak. But when I moved down to Minnesota, and it didn't matter how skilled I was because the guys they were stronger, they were bigger, they were more competitive. They were just more aggressive, kind of like what you typically see with an American, right? So that was a really, really big jump for me. And then to be honest, I mean, when I went from high school, so I was all state in high school, and I was the dates in the U.S. are different. So when I was a senior in high school, I was actually younger than guys who were juniors in high school. So when I graduated and I went, because we have January 1st cutoff dates, and there's in the US, it's usually like August 31st. So in that window, there would be juniors who were actually older than me, like a year younger than me, that were older than me. So that was a little bit bizarre because as I matured later. That happens all the time. It's why you see these Canadian guys who often go down to the States and then they end up back home if they don't reclassify. Now it's a little bit different because there's the prep school model. But yeah, I mean, that jump was huge. So out of high school, in high school, I played on what's called the EYBL circuit. I don't know if you guys know what that is. The Nike Elite Youth Basketball League, which is like the top basketball circuit in the United States. So I played at the team called Howard Pulley. And that was really eye-opening because I was playing with a bunch of guys that were no longer white guys. I was the only white guy on the team, and I was getting exposed left, right, and center, which was really great for me because I realized I had a whole heck of a long way to go. Anyways, going from that, then back to high school was obviously an adjustment because I dominated in high school after playing against that competition. I thought I was really good. And then I went to college, right? So I go to Minnesota State, and instead of going to a kind of lower level Division I school, I chose to go to the number one Division II school in the country at the time at Minnesota State. When I was 17 years old, we had guys that were 24 years old. So you can imagine that's like you guys stepping in the gym with guys that are in university, right? Like fourth year university. So that jump was massive, and it was extremely humbling. It was really challenging because I didn't even, it just wasn't fun because I couldn't do anything. Like it didn't matter how skilled I was again, because that was an even bigger click up physically. They're so strong, they're so fast, and didn't play a whole lot. Ended up coming back, went to UBC, or went to Fraser Valley first when that was UFV's first year. The coach named Barnaby Craddock, who was the Canadian Coach of the Year in what was then called the CIS, now it's U Sport. And to be honest, that wasn't that big of a jump for me because I'd already played at such a higher level every day. Not just as the league. I mean, Canadian basketball is really good, but my team at Minnesota State was extremely good. We had 4 guards that were seniors, and they were all region guards. Every day I guarded the preseason player of the year, who was my same position. So I got dominated every single day for an entire year. But the growth that you get from that is big, right? So I came home and I played at Fraser Valley for a year, and it wasn't that big of a jump for me because I'd already been exposed to a lot on the back end. But I mean, it's still university basketball is no joke.
Yeah.
It obviously the talent level is a lot higher than high school, like significantly higher. I actually I'm still home right now. I leave on Wednesday to go back to London. But I was at the Trinity UFE game last night, and I always say, like, the best thing that a high school kid could do is to go watch university basketball in Canada, because so many kids just think, oh, I'm going D1 or bust, but have no idea how good these guys actually are. Because all of those guys that are playing at that level probably have gotten interest from Division I schools. And then from there, going to pro was just a whole nother jump in itself, because not only are, now I'm not playing Canadian kids or maybe a couple Americans at UBC. Now I'm playing against guys that have been in the NBA, right? So that was a huge jump for sure. But by that point, you're a grown man, and it doesn't really matter to you who you're playing against. You don't care. There's not like the same when you're younger and you're kind of following the whole internet hype machine, and you see where these guys are and all that. You're like, oh man, this guy's better than me, right?
Yeah.
But when you go to that level and it's your job, you don't have time to think about that. You can't think about that. If you go into a game and you're nervous, you're dead in the water. So that was fun. I mean, it was cool to kind of be able to put your skills up against guys that had been highly ranked and touted and stuff like that. But every time you go up the basketball pyramid, I mean, people have no idea how many good basketball players there are in the world. No idea. Once you get there, you realize it's much less about your talent and it's much more about your habits to kind of keep you on the path, because there's no shortcut, right? There's no secret to this thing. You just chip away, continue to improve your skills, do the right thing, be a good teammate, and opportunities kind of multiply as you seize them, if you're doing the right things. If you don't, doesn't matter how good you are. You can be a great player, but if you're a jerk, nobody's going to help you, right?
Yeah. Awesome. All right. So spent a lot of time on that. So I think we're just gonna move on to the just straight basketball questions, just straight your opinion, right? So what has been like your main goal with your ventures in basketball, like grit and other things you've done outside of grit?
What's been my goal, like basically my motivation with it?
Yeah, like what do you what have you like always been like, because you've done a lot of work, like Grit Day especially, that's a lot of work, raised a lot of money for Parkinson's. I understand that, but like other, like when you run those camps, when you run the sessions on the weekends, when you started Grit Online.
Yeah, so my whole thing when I started this was I didn't like that, for lack of a better term, I felt like kids were getting misinformation about what it really takes to be good. Because the reality is, you don't need a trainer, you don't need anything. You need a work ethic, you need a desire, you need humility, and you need to have consistency and a relentless drive to obtain your goals, no matter what's in front of you. And I feel like now, it's kind of like 2 steps or 3 steps forward, 2 steps back. When I was coming up, there was only basketball BC. That was it. So like I make the provincial team when I'm, going into my senior year or all through. Well, that was the top 10 players in the province, and that was it. If you didn't make provincial team, there was nothing else. So it's great that there's all these clubs, because like guys like you guys get more, you get to play more, you get more games, right? You get more court time at an earlier age, more competition. But what's happened is that there is kind of an erosion of what I think was really good about our province and our game before in the country, in terms of just kind of like a centralized way of doing things and exposure to higher level basketball. So I was always coached in high school by university coaches, or we'd have pros come in, or we would have, and then it was the best guys were playing against you. And now, because it's spread out, not only is it diluted a little bit, so there's not as much high level talent around you, because ultimately you could tell someone this is how you have to do it, but it's a whole nother thing to be told what to do, and then to actually see it firsthand, right? So I wanted to be able to create a situation that mimicked very closely to kind of what I had experienced coming up, because it was such a unique experience. And then just, I wanted to empower kids. I wanted you guys to be able to realize that, look, you don't need to pay all this money. You don't need to have your hand held. Like, you need to be around good people who have your best interests at heart. And then ultimately the buck is passed to you guys. You got to be able to figure out, is this something I want to do? And if your hand's got to be held every day, it's never going to be like that. So in terms of like, from a training standpoint, I always go into it and I say, okay, look, I'm going to show you what to do. I'm going to give you a roadmap. I'm going to give you an overview of how you have to do this. And then ultimately you fill in the gaps, be resourceful, right? I don't need to tell you everything what to do every single day. You got to put the work in every day. So when I run camps and sessions, that's kind of my whole thing. What do they say? Teach someone how to fish and they can feed themselves for life, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of the motivation with that. Around, the grit day stuff and all the other stuff that kind of has come with it. That is to foster an element of community. All of my friends, my best friends to this day, I met through basketball. The people that I look up to, my mentors, all of them through basketball. I mean, I actually just did a podcast this morning with my high school coach in Minnesota. We haven't talked like that in 15 years, but we went back and we're chatting about that. And, the experience that I was able to go through as an athlete is very unique. And I feel like with how segmented the community has become, because now you have high school trainers, clubs, everybody wants a piece of you guys.
Yeah.
And then people, because there's money now being passed around, it's good in terms of the growth of the game, because you're getting more high level coaching or whatever right across the board, just more time in the gym. But there's a real lack of a sense of community, where I used to know everyone in the province, and we would go play all the time. And then I was mentored by the guys who had come before me, and they were mentored by the guys that had come before them. So at least you knew what it took to get there, and you were getting good advice that was reputable, right? And then from there, you develop your friends, whether it didn't have to be from Terry Fox or your club or whatever. It was just, this is a group of people who are like-minded, and they say, what, you're a representation of kind of the 6 people you spend your most time with, right? So I always sought out those people that were like me, because I wanted to, push myself forward. So anyways, a long roundabout answer is a lot of that stuff is geared around being able to foster a sense of community, something that I think is lacking, so that people have the support system to be able to succeed, right? And also develop friendships and relationships and all that stuff as you go. So
Awesome. Good. Next one.
We would just like to ask you now, what has been your way of overcoming adversity?
Oh man, that's why I named the company Grit. Because I looked at the whole landscape and I thought, okay, what is different between your guys' generation, my generation? What is the key ingredient that separates what I think is the difference between old school and new school? And the one word that kept coming up, I did like my little Venn diagram, and I did my notes, and I'm like, man, the one word that keeps coming up, and the reason why I think that I've had, decent success, not like I played in the NBA, but I've maxed out what I look back at my journey and I have no regrets. And the reason why I have no regrets is because I tried to approach everything with that tough nose approach, where I'm like, no excuses. It's nobody else's responsibility. It's literally just on me. So ultimately it comes back to grit, and that transcends basketball. I mean, you're going to forget basketball. Basketball is easy. It's all the other stuff that you have to deal with around it. And I think that basketball is a vehicle for what you're going to face in the real world. So if you can, approach life the way that you approach sport, and you have your routine, all the stuff that I've been preaching you guys for forever. You got a routine. You got, you time block your stuff. You go in, you have consistency, you're charting everything. And that just sets you up for success down the road, because that's what the real world's like. When you get out of like high school sport, nobody cares.
Yeah.
Nobody cares. You guys are live in a day and age now where you are so highly scrutinized at a young age. Like, I almost feel bad for you guys, because man, if I had all the social media that you guys have now, I'd be canceled when I was 17 years old. But You guys are walking into a world where sure, you have access to infinite resources, infinite amounts of knowledge, but what also comes with that is just eyeballs on you all the time, right? So I think that I've used sport as a way to kind of shape the person that I was, and almost like a trial run as what's going to come later in life.
Right. Who was one person outside of basketball that inspired you in life?
My parents, for sure. My parents are two of the toughest people that I've ever met. I mean, my mom was my parents got divorced when I was, I think, 3. And I mean, that's never pretty. Nobody, divorce is never fun for a family. So my mom was a shift worker. She was a nurse. She worked at the Royal Columbian as the top nurse in the cardiac surgery intensive care unit. And my dad was living in Minnesota, he was living in Winnipeg at the time. And obviously I had my brother, and then my mom was working like 3 jobs at times. You're a kid, you don't know what your parents are going through to keep the lights on, be able to provide for you, right? And now I look back and I think about all the stuff that my mom was doing at a young age to kind of keep life on track and have everything be normal, because I never wanted for anything. I never felt stressed. I was able to focus on what was directly in front of me because of how hard my mom was working behind the scenes. And then same thing, I lived with my mom till I was 14. Then I moved to Minnesota with my dad. Very different parenting styles, but coming from a place of love. And I think the thing that I learned the most from my dad is that just to be able to extend grace. You guys have met my dad, and I mean, he's a warrior. Like, the stuff that I post on social media, he actually lives that every day. Like, he can't, coming from a guy who was very much kind of how you guys know how I am today. That's what my dad was always like. And then he goes through Parkinson's, and it's been really challenging for him, not only on like a physical level, but if you're used to being a certain person and then all of a sudden you can no longer be that person, that's like extremely, extremely mentally challenging, right? To be able to stomach that. But the way that he approaches everything, it's never looking at pointing fingers or poor me or poor that. It's just, this is what it is. Sometimes things suck. You got to give grace and try to put yourself in somebody else's shoes, and then just always have a positive outlook. So without question, it's been my parents, the people that I look up to the most.
Okay, this wasn't on the plan, but I just want to talk about it. What are your thoughts on player rankings?
It's garbage. It's all trash. It's all trash. So I'll tell you a story about that. So coming out of high school, I went down to Minnesota, right, in 2003, I think. And everybody told me in BC that I was not going to make it because I was big fish, small pond. I chose, instead of playing juniors, I chose to play grade 9 because I looked at the landscape of where I was at in Pitt Meadows. And everybody at a young age wants to be on varsity. They want to be the top dog. But I looked at it at a young age and I was like, you know what? I need to learn the intangible skills to be able to succeed later in life. Excuse me. And also, like, understanding how to dominate is a skill in itself. How to lead is a skill in itself. So I chose to play on the grade 9 team at Pitt Meadows instead of playing junior. Everybody looked at me and thought, you're crazy, man. What are you doing? Why would you choose to play grade 9? Well, at that given time, based on the people that were on the team, on the junior team, it was just better for my development and my sense of happiness and enjoying what I was doing to do that in that given time. It's not always about going where you think is the shiny object. And this ties in a lot to college basketball or whatever, your job. Don't go where you want to go. Go where you're wanted. Go where the best opportunity is for you to be able to flourish with your skills and be able to grow, right? And that worked out massively. And I went on after that. I mean, I transferred to the US and it was a hard shift. I ended up coming out of the thing as the school's all-time leading scorer. I'm all-state and a McDonald's All-American nominee, and I go sign a full-ride scholarship. So when I went into Minnesota, I wasn't even going to be ranked probably in the top 2,000 in the state. Nobody knew who the heck I was. You look at Shaden Sharp. You guys know who Shaden Sharp is? He's the kid that's at Kentucky. Shaden Sharp wasn't even ranked. Shaden Sharp is actually from London. He works out in our gym in London. Shaden Sharp wasn't ranked, but he just committed to the process and like believed in himself and just shut out all the noise. And what happens? If you do that and you're not so concerned about what people think about you, but you fall in love with what you do every day, whether you get to where you want to get to from like a outcome standpoint of I'm ranked this or whatever, you're going to be much better off. And then, you know, my journey was not very traditional, but I ended up playing on the same floor as guys that are in the NBA. So it's not about who laughs first. It's about who quits last and who has the last laugh. And it's never going to be pretty. Everyone's got a story, but it's about, you know, developing that fortitude and using sport as a vehicle to be able to overcome and push through.
Sure. Do you have who is your favorite player of all time? NBA.
Easy, buddy. Easy, Kobe. Easy.
Cut it.
Best.
Yeah.
I was actually the thing that made me really.
Did you like him
Kobe
from a young age? Was he always your favorite?
No, actually, I liked Vince Carter. I obviously liked Michael Jordan. I got into basketball through the movie Space Jam. I remember watching Space Jam, and then I would like go on my driveway, paint lines at the end of my driveway, and the city would come try to paint over, and I'd just keep painting basketball lines at the end of my cul-de-sac. And but originally it was Michael Jordan, and then I liked Steve Nash because he was local.
Yeah.
I liked White Chocolate. I liked Vince Carter. You know, Vince Carter, for a time and place there was no one bigger in the game than Vince Carter. And then I remember Vince and Kobe playing, and I remember just like watching and reading up on Kobe's story. And it wasn't about that Kobe was like so good or he had flair when he was younger. He was maniacal about his work ethic. And I was a little bit of a loner growing up. Like, my parents go through this divorce. I'm just like kind of in a weird headspace. And then I use the game as a place of refuge because it was like therapy. Right. And I looked at what I heard about this Kobe guy, because at the time there's no social media. There's not all this stuff. I'm just reading this in Slam magazine, watching his games and stuff. And I'm like, man, like this guy, he's not perfect. And that's what I really liked about Kobe. He wasn't perfect human being by any means. And you saw his growth. And like, I think in this day and age, people get absolutely killed because they are not perfect in one regard. That guy, like, he messed up multiple times. I mean, he was kind of a jerk when he was younger, right? Like, but he was figuring it out. And then he come out the other side. And now, does anyone have a bad thing to say about the guy? Shot a lot, but no, right? It's all about who laughs last. So yeah, Kobe was for sure kind of my North Star, just in terms of his work ethic. And I remember times where I'd be in the gym at 3 a.m., be doing 3 workouts a day. My Achilles feels like it's going to snap. I literally would work out to the point where I would get my blood sugar so low that my eyes would go black. And then I'd be sitting there, that's pretty insane, isn't it? Like, and I'd be sitting there and I'd think, yo, you know what? I need to be able to perform when my body feels like this in case it happens in a game. And then I'd be like, that's nuts. And then I would think, but Kobe did it. So that would kind of help me get through. So it was always like this unattainable level of work ethic that inspired me. But yeah, that's an easy one, man. Kobe all day. Whether he's the best player or not, that's a discussion for that a lot of people like to have. Who's the greatest of all time? But who was my greatest player of all time and biggest inspiration? For sure, it was Kobe.
That's actually a great lead into the next question. Top 3 greatest players of all time.
It's really hard because it's like a cross generation, right? So you have to understand that people paved the way for certain players, and the game has evolved so much. I say this all the time to people about the debate of old school versus new school. People say, oh, this guy was like this, such and such, and this guy was such and such, and you didn't see him play. Well, the reality is, as we go, it's like humans evolve, science evolves, training evolves. There's never been better basketball players, top to bottom, in the NBA than right now. They're the best athletes like that have ever existed. If you drop the 12th man on an NBA team into the 80s, 70s, he'll kill him. Right? He'll from a skill standpoint, he'll be so much more skilled because the game has evolved. Now, I think social media has really like hurt the game, because the game is not about you. It's not about me. It's not about individual. It's a team game, right? Well, what gets celebrated now?
Individual.
Me. You don't even see games. People don't even consume whole games anymore. They just watch highlights. Yeah. And that's kind of led to the erosion of like a team concept. So ultimately, it's about the ultimate winner. That's what you want to do. So if you want to go by that standard, you look at guys like Magic Johnson, you look at Bill Russell, but then you say, okay, I'm going to drop J.R. Smith into 1960. J.R. Smith's going to have 80 points, right?
Yeah.
But will he be able to fit in? So it's a really, really hard question to ask, because you have to think about not only all those factors, but you also have to think about kind of just like the way that the rules have changed in the game. And then where that person was in regard to their peers at that given time. Like if you look at Wilt Chamberlain was like doing things that were so astronomical that we wouldn't even be able to comprehend it now. It would be like somebody averaging 65 points a game more.
Yeah, he
right?
feels like a conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
Like that 50, like does anyone actually believe that 50 point per game season? Like is like, I feel like it's blown off a lot. Like 50 points per game in the NBA. Like,
Imagine if I took you on the block. Imagine if we play one-on-one. What would happen?
I mean, no disrespect.
But no, that's what it is. That's what it was, right? Like, I mean, he was so much bigger that it was like dropping a man into an 8th grade practice. Of course, that guy's going to score 50 a game. He was so much more physically dominant. It was like men against boys, men against children, because he was like an athlete at that level, right? So anyways, really long answer. My top 3, just based on who I fit and what I've seen with my own eyes. Because, I got into basketball in the late 90s, or mid to late 90s. Obviously MJ, I mean, he is the carbon cut, clear copy, biggest killer of all time. And I, working in the marketing world a little bit, like I've heard stories from friends of mine that have dealt with MJ even still to this day. And he is just as competitive with everything that he does on the business side of things at Brand Jordan as he ever was when he played. He can't turn it off. Like he is a competitive addict. And then obviously I look at it from a skill standpoint. Kobe was just so skilled. The things that he was doing, I always used to say to people, okay, Ray Allen at the time was the best shooter. I said, dude, put Kobe in a gym with Ray Allen. Kobe will outshoot Ray Allen. He'll find a way to beat you. Like he's like that too. He's like that dog, right? And then unfortunately, as much as I don't really like him, I would have to say LeBron, because he just is such a physical specimen. And I mean, it's hard to argue. The science has evolved and the game is way different. And people now are just, the science has evolved and the game has evolved. So is training, but also so has the microscope that these guys are put under. So if you removed LeBron James from this era and you put him 10 years ago, people would be like, they're almost bored of how good he is now, right?
Yeah.
So it has to be LeBron. I mean, there's so many great players, but yeah, for me that I've seen with my own eyes, those are the 3 guys that really stand out. The most dominant player I've ever seen in my life is Shaquille O'Neal, though. What Shaquille O'Neal did in, like, I remember 2000, 2001, what he did to the New Jersey Nets and the Indiana Pacers and through that era, it was like nothing you've ever seen. Like if you watched it with your own 2 eyes, you're like, that guy would break my body in half. He is a freak. He cannot be stopped on a level that even Giannis doesn't do, because he was that big. So anyways, the top 3, my eyes, LeBron, Kobe, and MJ. And MJ's got to be number 1.
Do you think Giannis has potential to join them?
Yeah, Giannis has got that old school mentality in him, right? Like I remember watching an interview that really resonated with me. Just the little things. Like Giannis was young, and his story's been crazy, right? Like he came from 2nd division Greece. Like the league that I coach in right now we would dominate 2nd division Greece. Yeah. So to go from that all of a sudden to where he's at is just incredible, and is like, it shows how hard the guy's willing to work. But he's very old school in his approach. There's the story that I'm referring to. He goes and meets Kobe. Well, he shows up like 2 hours before Kobe gets there. And then they go through this workout, and Kobe puts him through, like, they do one shot like 50 times in a row. And he like really looked at it for what it was, asked all these questions, stayed after, took notes, and then started to take what he learned from that experience and integrated it right away. You look at his mentality. Like I saw an interview the other day, even where Giannis is talking about how he creates riffs in his mind so that he can find a way to get motivated on a game-to-game basis. Because an 82-game schedule in the NBA is absolutely insane. That's what the average fan doesn't realize. Like, sure, they're getting paid a bunch of money, but it's human nature. When you have a guaranteed contract, you're making more money than Jesus. Human nature is, if you're coming off of a plane, you just played 3 games in 4 days, you're coming off of a plane, you're in a city like Miami, most guys are going to go out, they're going to relax, they're not going to watch film, they're going to just, you just went through the ringer. That guy is relentless. It's on to the next thing right away, always. He's so single track focused. It's pretty incredible to watch. And yeah, I mean, if he gets a jump shot and a little bit of a post game, he does things though that even without that, like I don't know if you guys have been watching him this week, the passes that he's now able to make when he's coming downhill, and the way that the Bucks have changed the system a little bit is just incredible. Like he's special. So yeah, I mean, who knows? We'll see. Ultimately, people used to say Penny Hardaway and Grant Hill were going to be just as good as MJ, but what it really comes down to is not only can you do it, but can you do it for years upon years upon years? I think LeBron has kind of set the gold standard now. And the guy's 19 years in or whatever the heck it is, right? He's averaging like 27 a game. Like it's insanity what he's doing. So
I think that's everyone's best.
No. I mean, he'll break the scoring record for sure.
Yeah. All right. Who is the best player you have ever played against?
Ooh, best player I ever played against. Like the biggest name or the guy that I thought was the biggest dog. I guess I'll get into both.
We can do like a 2-part question, like the guy that busted your ass the most, where like I just can't do anything, and then like the biggest name as well.
So when I was in high school, playing EYBL, we're playing, and again, as you rise, like there's a lot of variables. So some guys just, for whatever reason, they don't make it, right? Or something happens. But there was a guard, his name was Chiron Collins. You guys are, after this podcast, you guys got to go look up Chiron Collins in high school. Okay. Chiron Collins was a 5'10" guard. He was 215 pounds. He was built like a middle linebacker. He could windmill, and he was extremely, extremely gifted. So we're playing at the University of Minnesota at our Howard Pulley tournament, and we had a guard named Kajo Ahalegbe. He was played at Northern Iowa. After that, it was like a 4-year starter. I had a guy on my team named Matt Janning. Matt's now playing in EuroLeague. I think we had 10 or 11 Division I guys on our team. So anyways, I'm on the floor because at the time I was the guy that could really space the floor. I was a shooter. So I'm on there, and our Kajo gets 3 fouls in the first half. And my coach didn't realize it. So we're going up and down, and he realizes, he looks up, he's like, oh shoot, Kajo's got 3 fouls. He's like, Doug, switch on to Sharon. And I'm like, dude. And I was 15 years old, and like a young 15. I wasn't matured. I wasn't like you guys see me now where I'm like a bigger guy, but this is the moment that changed it for me. He dominated me so thoroughly from a physical standpoint. He like took my soul in 3 possessions. So he comes down, I'm in a switch, and I'm already on edge because I'm the only white guy on the floor. He comes down, he shoots a 3 in my face, okay, off of a cradle. Like I back up because he knows that I can't guard him. The next time down, I try to avoid him in transition. Okay, we miss, they come down, we're cross matched. He comes off a side ball screen. I have to switch on to him again. Bang, step back 3 in my face, 6 points, 2 possessions. Now my coach is looking at me. He's like, Doug, you gonna guard? I'm like, dude, what do you want me to do, man? Like, I can't guard this guy. He's literally got 35 pounds on me. Like, and he's a better, what do you want me to do? He was the number one ranked guard in the Midwest. He was definitely like a top 10 prospect. He rose super fast, right? Was at one point the top ranked guard in the country. The next possession, come down in transition. We get all jumbled up. He goes like rollover, crossover, Euro step. I go in to take a charge, block, and 1. 9 points, 3 possessions. And he was like seeking me out every single time, like a dog. And then from that moment going forward, I just understood like there's levels to this, and you are nowhere near where you need to be. And it drove a work ethic in me because all I could remember is I never wanted to feel like that ever again. Sharon Collins ended up going to Kansas. They won a national championship. He was the starting point guard. He played in the NBA for a while, but his career didn't go like the way you wanted to go, just in the NBA at least. I mean, he was an All-American in college. Like this guy was, and he's from Chicago. Guys from Chicago are extremely, extremely tough. But because he was only 5'10" guard, right? So, I mean, guys that I played against that were really good overseas, I played against Rodney Magruder, Justin Holiday, D. Brown. He was a point guard for Illinois with Darren Williams. They were the number 1 ranked team. Played against him. Man, the list goes. There were so many guys like European dudes who ended up being EuroLeague type guys that were really, really good. In high school, I played J.R. Smith, Isaiah Thomas. This is a funny story for you guys. Isaiah Thomas, like lefty Isaiah to the younger Isaiah Thomas. I'm not that old, not the real Isaiah Thomas. So I'm 14. Yeah, 14. I'm down in like some terrible tournament with Basketball BC. We're like, I don't even know, Bellevue or something like that. And I had just come back. Sorry, I was older. I was U17. I came back after I played Polite. My last year, I actually didn't play UIBL. I chose to come home and play provincial team. So anyways, I come back now and I go from averaging, 25 a game in the biggest division in Minnesota as a junior in high school. I think I'm the man. I come home, Basketball BC. It's me, a guy named Bull Kong, who ended up playing at Gonzaga, and Rob Sacre, who played in the NBA for a bit. And I was like the best guard at that time on the team for me and Bull, whatever. Anyways, so the ball goes up and I don't know who the hell we're playing. We're playing this school called Curtis High School. They got these ratty jerseys, the Saturday morning game in some terrible gym. And there's this little guard. And I look at him like, like a guy that I ended up playing with, Alex Murphy, played with me at UBC. I go, yo, Murph, I got this guy. The first possession down, Isaiah's got the ball. Okay. This is a true story. Isaiah Thomas has the ball. He's like in kind of a wrestle with me, and I'm bigger than him. I push him off. He backs up. He goes to hit me with a killer crossover. I steal the ball and I go lay it in. As I'm looking at him, and I take the ball out of bounds. I look at him. I'm like, yo, cookies, man. I'm eating that all night. And he looks at me. This kid, he's small, 5'7", okay? He looks at me. He slaps the ball and he goes, what did you just say to me, white boy? Isaiah Thomas dropped 50 points on me that game. And I had Rob Sacre behind me, and I was a very good high school player. I could not guard him. There was nothing I could do. He was so skilled. I'm talking threes, transition, off the ball screen. There's nothing that he couldn't do at his size. I just thought, okay, I'm just going to rush him. I'm going to speed him up, and I'm going to feed him to Rob, who's behind me, because Rob Sacre, I don't know if you guys know who that is. He's a 7-footer in high school. So I'm now speeding him up and laying Isaiah Thomas. Well, Isaiah Thomas is just chucking up floaters from the free throw line that aren't even hitting the rim. Still to this day, I did a Hoops Journey podcast with a good friend of mine, Aaron Mitchell, and I told him that story. Aaron was an assistant coach, and we joke about that game to this day because I've never seen an ass whooping like that in my life. I've never been on the other end of it ever. So, yeah, that was probably the worst experience I had. But yeah, I mean, the basketball world is so small, and this kind of ties into what people don't understand in BC is like, you might be good for BC. There are so many good players out there that you can't rest on your laurels, because ultimately you're not competing against Buddy from Charles Best. You're not competing against Guy from BC. You're competing against the game is global now, right? So you're competing against those guys, but you can't frame it as, okay, I'm competing against you and use the social media kind of compare machine. You'll get depressed if you do that. You just got to compete against yourself every day. Try to get as good as you can and max out. That's kind of the biggest piece of advice that I would give players.
Who is one player you wish you got the chance to 1v1?
Steve Nash.
Steve Nash?
Yeah, because when I was coming up, I really, that was the guy who made it out of BC.
Yeah.
And I always was like, okay, I want to see where you stack up with that guy, because you just want to know how good he is. My coach, Rich Goulet, always used to tell me, he's like, you are more skilled at a young age than Steve Nash was. So I was like, all right, what's this guy all about? And then Nash, obviously, like, he was, Steve Nash.
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, I would love to go back in high school and just to see. Now, he would kick my ass for sure. Like, there's no doubt. Goulet was just telling me that probably to make me feel good. But as a competitor, based on where I was at that time, I would have loved to have played Steve Nash in high school for sure, just to see how good he was.
Prime you versus prime Steve Nash. What's the 1v1? What's the score to 100?
100-1, Steve Nash.
You think like the 1 point you got, like when he just stops playing defense and lets you get one? Is 99-0 he lets you get one? Or is it like a...
No, I don't know, man.
Or is it like a tough bucket? Like, you like 2 dribbles, he's all in your face, you just hit a tough fade.
Prime me versus prime Nash? This guy was the MVP of the NBA.
Okay. Prime you versus like 2011, 2012 Steve Nash, like the Lakers Steve Nash.
I don't know, man.
He's not injured when he's healthy.
Too early.
Oh, Lakers Steve Nash, I'm breaking his sternum. Lakers Steve Nash, I'm breaking his sternum and I'm breaking his femur. I'm running at him in transition and putting 245 pounds into his frail chest. Prime Steve Nash, nobody in the province scores a bucket on him unless he's people don't understand. Like, you look at Nash, you're like, oh, he's a white boy playing the NBA. Steve Nash finished the beep test. Like, Steve Nash was an unbelievable athlete. Could you imagine finishing the beep test? What?
We've never done the beep test. We're too young.
You never done the beep test?
I've done it once.
I've never done it.
Oh my, you guys got to put that
It's
on.
hard.
Look up the beep test and go through the beep test.
It's hard.
Try to finish that.
It's hard.
So Nash would
hard.
he
Like,
finished
it's a
the
long
beep
run.
test. I've never heard of anyone finishing the beep test in my life. And then he would go work out. Like, he just was so insane, right? And yeah, so that's my answer. But to answer your question about how me and Nash would go, not good for me.
Not good.
Okay. Who are the 3 best players you worked with?
Kevin Durant, Carmelo Anthony, Donovan Mitchell, probably. Mitch is killing it. Yeah, I mean, work with a lot of really good guys. I actually just posted the other day a little post. I don't really talk about it too much because I hate the whole training thing. Like, who cares? I go work with a guy. Like, does that mean that I made him? No. Like, I just was in the gym with him. What am I going to teach Kevin Durant? Nothing. You know what I mean? But yeah, it was pretty special. I actually, story about working with a guy named Chris Brickley. Chris, friend of mine. He's kind of like the top whatever Instagram trainer in the world.
He's on 2K.
Yeah, he's on 2K, which is crazy because I was with him when we had $0 and we were literally couldn't even afford to pay for Subway. But he's done really well for himself. He's really good at what he does. We were working out. CJ Mccollum. CJ McCollum is like, he's like a 6'4", you know, he got work for everything that he's turned himself into. Then you look at KD. Well, KD had just won finals MVP. So, you know, everything that was happening that summer with Kevin Durant, he was going nuts on Twitter because he was not exactly focused. We'll call it that. Okay. He wasn't in the gym. CJ was in there every day because CJ has to be in there every day to be that. You know, he's not 6'9". He can't hit his head on the rim. He's not a freak, but he is meticulous with his work ethic. He's a dialed true pro. Not that KD is not. KD is also special and he's a hooper and he loves to play. But, you know, you get beat. He was getting beat down by the media for so long. And then he finally gets the championship. So he kind of relaxed and let his body heal and stuff. Anyways, fast forward to this summer. And it's August. So there was New York Fashion Week, which we were in New York. And a lot of players come through New York in the summertime. So Chris is as close with everybody in the NBA as you can possibly get. Like, he is as connected top to bottom with everyone that's in the rap industry. It's pretty incredible, his network. Anyway, so he's texting KD, and KD hasn't touched the ball since he won finals MVP. He's been partying and stuff. So Chris goes, yo, man, like, camp is in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. What are you doing? Like, you can't go from being finals MVP to coming back and being trash, regardless of where your mental state is at. You got to get back in the gym. So KD kind of like chilled for a week and didn't take the offer. And then anyways, I find out the morning of, he's like, yo, Kevin Durant's coming today. We have to cancel the other workouts because the media attention will be so insane. We had to vinyl out the windows at this gym, the Lifetime gym. You guys have seen it. I'm sure that gym that all the runs were happening in. So we're in there. We have to vinyl off the windows. We have to pull down the partition. The only people that were allowed in the gym was me, Kevin Durant, CJ McCollum, Chris Brickley, and Kevin Durant's Nike rep. And we go through this workout where basically, you know, KD hadn't worked out in 3 months. CJ, it was 5 shots of one thing for CJ, 5 shots of one for KD, and I'm guarding them both. So every possession I'm guarding, Chris is passing, right? And we go through a progression similar to like what we do in the workouts that you guys have come to before. And CJ McCollum is absolutely torching Kevin Durant, torching him. It looks like Kevin Durant has never touched a basketball because he literally hasn't touched the ball in 3 months. CJ McCollum is at the top of his game. Well, CJ McCollum absolutely busted him up that day, like destroyed him. I want to say that the score was like 25-7. KD gets pissed off. And I'm talking like in a series of 5 shots. He had 25 points to the 7 wins that KD had. The next day, KD gets in early. He gets his sweat in. He goes through 3 days. 4 days later, he looked like Kevin Durant that won the NBA Finals MVP. Like he was incredible. So that's for sure. I would say overall the best talented guy that I've worked with is Kevin Durant. I mean, he's a generational talent. The things that he could do are just insane, for lack of a better term.
So adding on to that, like, you know, you've worked with some of the best players. What's one thing that you've
Mhm.
like what's the one thing that you've seen in all of them that like it's just a pattern, like you either got it or you don't? Like when you're like working with them, you notice this one thing that like maybe some people don't notice it, maybe it's like not noticeable at all, but they all have it, and everyone who's not there doesn't have it.
Okay, so I coached professionally, right?
Yeah.
There's a guy named Glenn Davis. You guys know who Glenn Davis is? Big Baby.
Yeah.
So I had Big Baby in St. John's. Glenn Davis is as gifted of an athlete in a different type of way. Like he's not vertical, but he's huge and his feet are unbelievable. Like, and his hands are unbelievable. His touch, he's so intelligent. Glenn Davis did not have good work habits. You know, you look at his career, you look at his emotional resiliency, like he had all these outbursts. Now you look at somebody whoever in the Ennis Cantor. I work with Ennis Cantor. Ennis Cantor has unbelievable work habits. Glenn Davis is a way better player than Ennis Cantor in terms of just their talent, right? And I'll use these two guys because I think it's a really good example. They're both Celtics. Ennis Cantor was so disciplined. He kept himself in great shape all the time. He was polite. I mean, he's a little bit outspoken on social media about political issues and stuff, but Ennis is like the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Treats people well, says please and thank you, doesn't ever act like he's above anyone. First guy to be there, last guy to leave. You know, takes his craft very seriously, but is also humble and just understands this is what he does. You know, being good at basketball doesn't make you a better human being. It's just something that you do, and that doesn't represent who you are as a person per se, right? That's just what you do. You're really good at that. So he acted like a polished pro in everything that he did. Glenn, on the other hand, did not. So what happened to Glenn Davis? Glenn Davis out of the league. And his Cantor is now like signing. He's taking advantage of these huge contracts, and he'll be crazy rich, right? And we'll have a great story. So the one consistent theme that I see is just about the personal habits of these guys. There's a lot of players who are very, very good, but the players that last are the guys that go about it and act like a pro. The same stuff that we preach to you guys is the thing. It's not rocket science. It's not like we're just telling you this or I tell you guys this stuff because it's my personal opinion. Like I've seen it over the course of time, and it translates. It's more than just basketball. You know, if you show up late to a job, if you're not prepared, if you don't plan your week on Sunday to maximize your week over the course of time, if you're not, you know, if you're rude in meetings, whatever, you're not going to last anywhere. Doesn't matter if it's basketball or not. So those common intangibles, they transcend hoops, and all those guys, all the greats, they all have that. And I mean, what I didn't mention there is they all work relentlessly like dogs all the time, and they love what they do. You know, it's one thing to you could do all those things, but if you don't love it, if you don't really love the commitment to the day to day, you don't find kind of solstice and therapy in what you do, and find a way to even start to enjoy the parts of it that maybe aren't enjoyable at times, but you kind of like trick yourself into it that it is enjoyable because you like that feeling of overcoming and sense of accomplishment that comes with doing hard things. If you don't have that, then you won't last either, because you can only fake it to make it for so long, you know. So it's all intangibles based. It's all things that you can control for sure.
All right, and then our last question. Do you prefer being a player or being a coach?
It's a good question. I think if I had the mind that I have now, and the perspective that I have now, and I was a player, that would be the best. Because when you're a player, you're so caught up in what you're doing, how you're playing. It affects your self-identity so much. If you have a bad game, like the guys that are the biggest dogs, when they have a bad game or they have a bad year or they have a whatever, it like really bothers them to their core, and that's what fuels them. It's not just something you do, it's who you are at that point, right? Because you're addicted to it. But that can also be a curse as a player, because if you know, it really starts to weigh on your confidence, and then if you're too self-aware, you think too much, if you're not self-aware enough, you're probably going to shoot yourself in the foot because you're going to act like a jerk to somebody. You're going to piss somebody off. So it's like finding that happy balance. I think the moment that you lose that feeling of, your self-identity is so intertwined to your performance that you kind of lose it as an athlete. And as a coach, you don't have that because you look at the big picture. You're not so caught up in momentum. You just know that you got to come to work the next day. So I don't really have an answer for you because I've really appreciated the entire journey that I've had. I think that as a player, I maxed out, and as a coach, I'm trying to max out, and I like both journeys for what they are. You don't have all the answers. You just try to, much like your parents, contrary to what you guys think. If your parents listen to this, they'll probably agree. Your parents don't know what they're doing all the time. They just try to do the best they can in that situation with all the information that they have at that given time. So I think I wouldn't choose one over the other. They're very different. I miss playing, of course, it's the best, but it's really cool to be able to, not only as an X's and O's coach, because that's only part of it, but to be able to kind of mentor. That's a whole nother aspect that is something that I've really come to appreciate and really enjoy. So both are really good.
All right, and then you want to do the metaphor?
Sure. What is a metaphor you would use to tie basketball with anything?
Oh man, the easiest one. Ball is life. That's easy because it is. It's everything that I've learned from the game. My friends, who I am, the intangibles, all the stuff that we talked about on here. I didn't just learn that like coming out of the womb. I came from tough parents who I think raised me and my brother the right way. But everything, that I've come to become and has been reinforced through sport. And for me, it's been basketball. So without it, I don't know who I would be. I don't know where I would be. It's like my vehicle. It's been my refuge. It's been my best friend. It's been kind of everything, right? So it's so much more than just a game. The game, the actual physical act of putting the ball in the hoop is so minuscule on the grand scale of what sports and what basketball for me has meant. So ball is life, baby.
All right, and so that's gonna be the end of our episode. Thank you so much, Coach Doug, for coming on, teaching us telling us about yourself, and yeah, thank you. Have a good day.
No sweat. What do you guys